Yeah. It could be 100
So it still works.
And
just
I've been an off-and-on distributor for about 10 years. We will go around the room, the three of us, and introduce ourselves. I'm here from Florida, by the way. This is Matt Parmley. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Matt Parmley. I'm one half of the Kaiju Transmissions podcast. Also, my voice is going in and out, so just bear with me as I try to struggle through today.
I think that's true of all of us.
Yes.
Doing anything, the voices are going. And Ira? Turn it on. See if there's a switch. Ah, magic.
All right. I'm Ira Taborn. I'm the guy who submitted a bunch of ideas to Martin and did not realize he wouldn't turn any of them down.
Yeah, Martin's always eager for fresh new ideas. If you had some, that's great. Tell us what other panels you did this weekend.
Later today I'm doing the How to Kill Kaiju panel, which will be a review of different super weapons used on Godzilla, and tomorrow I'm doing the Americans in Godzilla movies, where I survey the use of American characters in Godzilla movies.
You made way too much work for yourself.
Yes, I did.
I do one panel a year, that's enough. Okay, what I thought I would do to get us started, because I really like these panel discussions to be interactive with the audience. I mean, we all want to share our memories and our appreciation for this film with each other, so we're not going to sit here and give a speech at you. But, well, I am, but they aren't. And then, we'll be taking questions from the audience and just basically open it up to a group discussion. My connection to this film goes back to 1961, when my late sister and I saw Mothra on a double bill with the Three Stooges in Orbit, Columbia release, at a drive-in theater. And it was very weird because we were on the roof of the car. My parents were watching a movie on the other screen, and so my sister and I were watching these movies on the roof of the car with no sound, but we were mesmerized anyway. And a couple years later, we had Chiller Theater in Pittsburgh, which is where I grew up, that area. Bill Cardill, our marvelous host, introduced us to Godzilla, Godzilla vs. Mothra, Monster Zero, and all these wonderful, wonderful films. Cut to 20 years later, in 1980, my sister was diagnosed with leukemia.
No, you did.
And she was given 2 years to live. But they gave her all kind of different treatments. She had interferon and other various alternative therapies, and managed to cheat the devil for quite a few years. In 1997, it got kind of desperate, and so she went to have a bone marrow transplant at MD Anderson in Texas. And when she left, I packed a little Trendmasters Mothra. You may remember them, they were about this big. And I said, you have to take this with you because Mothra always comes back. And she did. And she came back, and sadly, she only lived another 3 years. It was one of those, the operation was a great success, but the patient died situation where the whole experience of the bone marrow transplant so weakened her immune system that eventually a simple little virus that wouldn't make a child sick killed her. But we had her for 20 years. So, cut to 7 years later, I grew up on Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine and all those things, and had heard the stories about Gojira, this alternate version of Godzilla, King of the Monsters. And one day I was in Best Buy, and by God, there it was. I snatched it up, because I'd been reading about it for years, and went home and was utterly stunned by what I saw, because nothing really prepared me for it. And it suddenly returned me back 20-some years to when I was a Godzilla fan, watching movies as a kid on TV. And I started every week, I'd go to Best Buy when I got my paycheck, and I'd grab 2 or 3 Godzilla movies off the shelf, not knowing anything about. I didn't even know that there'd been movies made after 1984. Because there was no internet, I didn't have the internet search for it, I hadn't paid attention. So I grabbed all these movies, and I'd go home and watch them, and I saw one that I didn't really look at closely, Godzilla Tokyo S.O.S. It's like, okay, whatever, it's a wacky title. I still don't get the title. But I popped it in the DVD player, and we have the opening sequence where the Bonin Islands, and it's like, this is strangely familiar. And we have the pilots chasing something. And then we have the little singing voices that the pilot hears in his ears. And then we have this silhouette that goes by the camera. And I caught on, because I had no clue Mothra was in this movie. I hadn't seen Mothra in a movie in forever. And when they did the satellite shot, where it shows, it clarifies and clarifies and clarifies until you see Mothra's wing dot detail, I was sobbing so hard I had to stop the film. And then I started it up again. First I watched that like 3 more times. Then I started it up again. It's like, okay, but then it's Hiroshi Koizumi and the little girls. And I'm wallowing on the floor in a puddle of my own urine. I am crying so hard. It just ravaged me. And I find myself sobbing off and on. And I still do when I watch this movie. This is the only Godzilla movie that I know of that is incredibly sentimental. And it blatantly relies on your affection for the whole series, especially Mothra, but the characters and different setups. There's so many little nods and references that just tweak you. I call it the Star Trek 6 of Godzilla movies. Because that was like the last sad Captain Kirk and the gang, and he's like, oh no, you know, and the signatures at the end. This is kind of like that for me. And I think a lot of people agree that should have been the 50th anniversary film. And they should have said, okay, we're done now for a while, instead of that other thing. So anyway, so I'm unconsolably weepy whenever I watch this movie, which I do at least 3 or 4 times a year. And whenever they run it in the various marathons, I'm a total sucker for it. I see that first 5 minutes and I'm wiping them away, and I have to go back and watch it again. And so what I wanted to add that to the conversation when we're talking later is it's funny how certain movies, like songs, will connect with your life and your emotional life. And you'll make connections that sometimes are utterly irrational, but really affect you emotionally. And so we can pick that up as a topic a little later down the line. Matt now is going to inform us and educate us a little bit, because I know nothing about the production of the film. Like I said, when I saw it, it was already 3 or 4 years old, and I didn't even know it existed. So, or all the Heisei films, much less the Millennium films. The only reason I knew about Godzilla 2000 was that Mike Schlesinger is a friend of mine and has been for about 20 years. And we used to hang out, remember news groups? Early internet news groups?
Yeah.
We used to hang out in alt movies silent and discuss silent movies. Michael Schlesinger is a friend with a lot of film restoration people and stuff like that. And but he happened to mention that he picked up the rights to this Godzilla movie and he was supervising the dub. And it ended up being much more than a dub. It was a re-edit, re-scoring, re-sound effect, and he did a wonderful job. So that's about all I knew about Godzilla at that time until I started buying these things like crazy. So Matt is now going to fill us on how did this film and why did this film get made?
So, obviously this is a sequel, formed a duology from Godzilla X and Mechagodzilla. And there's a really great 6-minute interview with Sci-Fi Japan that Tezuka, the director, actually did. During the script writing process, Toho basically would say, hey, here's 3 or 4 scripts, pick the one that you like. And Tezuka said, I didn't like any of them, I thought they were all boring. One featured Mothra, he said one had Godzilla sleeping on an island, Mothra then shows up. So what he did was he actually went home and he wrote a script overnight. That is a script that was actually fleshed out then by writer Masahiro Yotani, who basically wrote Kaneko's Godzilla Mothra, King Ghidorah, G&K. And he also wrote Kaneko's Crossfire film. So that is how the movie kind of came into being. After this, we all know the end scene, there was a rumor that persisted. At the very end of the movie, they have that reveal where they show that Godzilla's DNA is still being kept after the conclusion of the film, kind of showing, man never learns their lesson, we're going to keep screwing with nature, we're going to keep doing what we want. Because of that scene, and actually there's a couple pieces of art coming up in the slideshow, there was actually a rumor about this being the second film of a planned trilogy. And I'm going to try to get to it. There it is. So you have multiple mecha kaiju that these were actually in the art book. You can get these on the Tokyo S.O.S. Complete Works. And people saw this online for probably 2 or 3 years. after the movie was made, people were like, hey, what happened to the third film? Well, there was never a planned third film. The 50th anniversary was always going to be Final Wars. This was just something that they kind of put in. The art book, and the stinger at the end of the film is kind of showing, again, man has never learned their lesson. That's all that scene was about. It was never intended to be a trilogy. I have a couple bits of trivia that I'm going to kind of go to real quick. So Shinichi Chujo, he's a character from the original Mothra in 1961, and he's a grandfather in this film. He actually has a cameo in Grand Caesars. His character actually appears in that because there was a cross-promotion for Tokyo S.O.S. And in fact, Kiryu's hangar, where he actually is basically stored, they actually use that to store one of the government robots in that particular live-action series, which is pretty neat. I mean, aside from that...
Was it a television series?
Yes, a live-action TV series. And there's a bunch of...
Because we never heard of it, so tell us about it.
I don't know much about Grand Caesars. We gotta give a shout out to Kevin Daring, who worked with Mazer Patrol, for giving me a little factoid.
They use some of the
yeah.
miniatures and
Yep.
stuff.
Yep. So here is the kind of the end scene where you have all the DNA. There's actually multiple monsters planned there. There's I think Kumon was one of them. I think they looked at like Mecha Ebra. This is kind of the man keeping all the DNAs for themselves, not learning from Mothra, saying, hey, if you don't stop messing with nature, I'm going to come and attack you. And life needs to live itself in the time allowed, as opposed to you guys messing with everything. All these pictures are going to be mostly behind the scenes stuff. And I actually love this suit right here was actually constructed for the first film, and it appears in a flashback in Tokyo S.O.S. I always thought that scene was CG because it's filmed in a very flat black and white. They made a suit, and it was actually a 3/4 suit that was fitted for Kitagawa, who played Godzilla. It's kind of goofy looking, but in the execution isn't great. But that's the suit that they actually used for the black and white flashback when Godzilla is hit with the oxygen destroyer at the beginning of the film. In the first movie, and then the flashback later on. So as far as some behind-the-scenes tidbits, that's kind of what I have. I guess I'm gonna pass it to you. I think you had some tidbits you want to add about it.
Yeah, sure. So Tokyo S.O.S. at its core is basically a love letter to Mothra.
Yeah.
That's basically the core of it. So just a quick review of Mothra's place at Toho. So just to get a vague idea of the importance of Mothra, Toho Studios is a very historically important studio in Japan. They're one of the big four. They basically started the movie industry in Japan. They've done lots of things. And if you go to their studio, they'll have actual artwork of some of their movies. Notably, if you go to their front entrance, they have a massive painting, or picture at least, of Seven Samurai, a film they made. They also, basically next to that picture, have a massive painting of Godzilla, on the outskirts. If you go into the studio properly, a little ways, so this is something you can only see if you get into the studio, and they're not a publicly accessible studio like Universal or whatnot. So this artwork is wholly for themselves. There was a massive picture of Mothra. So for Toho, for whatever reason, holds Mothra very dear to themselves in a particular way. And so the original Mothra film is also unique because unlike basically all of the other kaiju films, it's fantasy.
Yes.
And not just fantasy in the sense of, there's magic. It's also fantasy in themes. Science fiction is fundamentally about the future. Speculation about the future. You can see that in Godzilla. Godzilla is, basically a warning. Hey, guess what? We're making new technology and it's going to be terrible. And that kind of pseudo-theme can appear. The fear of what is to come is a constant theme in a lot of kaiju films. Mothra is not about that. Mothra is about reverence for the past. The internal conflict is some guy kidnaps these fairies and then exploits them for wealth. And because no one's willing to do anything to stop him, this giant moth comes out of nowhere and starts, wrecking through Japan trying to get her hands on them. So Mothra is always for that reason, held a very weird place in the Toho canon, because every time she pops into another, into a Godzilla movie, there we go. What ends up happening is you have this, she takes her fantasy themes with her into these films. So, for example, there is never an attempt at a even really fake scientific explanation for the cosmos, aka the Shimbujin, aka the fairies.
I think it would be fair to say that Mothra, with the exception of maybe, let's say, King Caesar, I'll throw that in. Mothra is the only only one of the kaiju characters that is treated as a mythological figure.
Yes,
It's
absolutely.
definitely a mythological thing, and we're supposed to just accept this mythology
Right.
with no explanation. There's no explanation for the fairies. There's no explanation why there are 2 new fairies 41 years later either. You just kind of go along with the gag. But it's there to explore these themes of reverence for the past and not screwing around with nature.
Pretty much.
That was good. I wanted to point out that, of course, I'm terrible at remembering Japanese names, but a couple of years ago we had the director. Yeah, well, you go ahead and say his name if you know it. I don't remember.
Masaki Tezuka.
Masaki Tezuka, and the actor who played Chujo, who was, as I recall, was kind of a last-minute grab. Somebody else canceled, and they got him instead, and I was like, hooray! I was really excited to meet Chujo. And I did get to talk to both of them. They both had a little fleeting English, but I think he really got a kick out of me explaining my sad story about Mothra and how much that film meant to me, because I think he really pushes the whole mythological thing very strongly in the film. Not just with Mothra, but also with the whole theme of Kiryu, who essentially, by the end of the movie, becomes sentient. And it's weird because if you really think about it, you don't really think of Godzilla as being intelligent. He's a creature of instinct and he's a force of nature, but it's not like Godzilla's sitting there plotting his little plot. He just is, and he goes, and wherever he moves, things get destroyed. It's not like he goes, now I'll go to Osaka and mess that place up. He doesn't think like that. He is an animal. Whereas Kiryu, which is made of the bones of Godzilla, we're told, seems to be a combination of the bones, the themes of the film, and a primitive AI almost, if you will, by the end of the film when he's helping Chujo escape and saying sayonara, which and there's another one of those moments where I go through like 18 boxes of Kleenex because it's like, Nega-G, I didn't understand you. All that stuff just gets me every time.
Well, yeah. One of the things he was very good at was incorporating very strong Shintoist beliefs into those films. To go back to science fiction versus fantasy. Outside of Mothra, most of the kaiju are basically giant animals. Yeah. So their threat, there's usually generally their motive at the quote-unquote antagonist is they want something, usually food, and basically humanity is either the food or it is in the way of the food. And that is what drives most of the conflict. Whether it's interpretations of Godzilla where he's basically eating nuclear power, and humans need that nuclear power for power, or just straight up he's eating a train full of people. That's generally how it works. Mothra, because of her distinction as a mythological character, as a distinction as a goddess effectively, has actual motives. They're not just based on instinct. Yet, it's kind of an instinct that she's going after the Shimbujin in her first movie, but there's still a,
Right, but it's also, she's still not quite sentient.
Right.
It's not a human type of intelligence. It's largely instinctually driven, but the motivations are so different.
Right.
I think that's what you're going for. Is the motivations are driven by different impulses. I think there's also something that, in its very nature, is peculiarly different of the our reaction visually to the insect morphology as opposed to more anthropomorphic creatures that have 2 eyes, 4 legs, and more or less have a guy inside a suit in them, whereas bugs are really more alien seeming. But she's such a majestic bug. You know, the little fur around the eyes. There's just something very grand and idealized. She's like the ultimate butterfly or moth.
Right.
You know, and it's very good. And the funny thing to me is, I'm sure when they were, some idiot, I knows I'm doing a panel and texts me. And I just texted him 2 minutes ago, my panel is starting now. But when they did Mothra originally, I'm sure it never occurred to them that, hey, we can bring this back later and stick her with Godzilla. I'm sure that never crossed anybody's mind. And even funnier when you think about it, what would be a least likely effective opponent to Godzilla but a giant butterfly? Really? And yet, the battle between Mothra and Godzilla is one of the greatest achievements of Eiji Tsuburaya and Honda in terms of being visually thrilling. That's 7 amazing minutes of special effects and technology that I don't think they ever beat. I think it's the most amazing monster fight in all of kaiju-dom.
Every time I show a friend of mine who hasn't watched that movie, that scene, they get completely caught off guard how aggressive and violent that fight is.
And it's dozens of different techniques in it. There's stop motion in it. There's hand puppetry. The shots of Mothra's legs going like crazy like this, and just banging on Godzilla's head. There's so many different different film speeds that they use. It's like he was going all out in that particular scene, and it's much more exciting than it really has any right to be. When you think it's a bug versus Godzilla, you would think that would end with splat, but it doesn't. I mean, she puts up an amazing fight, and then has this heart-rending, tragic ending where she goes and dies, and then you have the babies come. I mean, there's the themes of renewal with Godzilla, with Mothra, it's a running theme, which is why I gave that toy to my sister. And the idea that they keep coming back generation after generation. I love the idea that the ones that hatched in that film were twins. And then we know that the one died after the battle, but the other one went on to return and see Monster. And by then it had morphed into the adult state. But the way they keep bringing that, and then of course they echoed all of that in S.O.S. so beautifully.
Yes, they did.
That's another film where they're playing on your sentimental memory of the films from the 60s.
Yes.
Suzuka's really good at that, actually. If you've seen the original Mothra, the first time that Shinichi's introduced as a character, there's this gag where he's always hiding in space. He's got a newspaper in front of his face.
Oh, yeah.
He's got a book in front of his face. They repeat the gag at the beginning of Tokyo S.O.S. because you meet him, he's sitting there reading the book. And Suzuka always kind of goes back to the Showa roots. I mean, all the monsters he brings back. Kamibus, Showa monster. That was something he really liked to play up. And you got to talk about Mothra. Here's a picture, when to kind of go back to, that's the prop they used. Mothra has never looked so good. Since the 60s, this is the best.
The Mothra miniature, if you will call it that, the Mothra puppet, I guess you would call it, was the largest. I believe it has a 15-foot wingspan. And the shots what they got, and I still don't know what they were made of, that amazed me so much are how the wings flex when they flap. They don't look rigid and stick like Ghidorah. You know, they really have a rhythm to them, but you can't tell what they're made of. Is it fabric? Is it rubber? Is it plastic? But they just flap so beautifully, and the quality of motion in it is amazing in that miniature and the detail.
I have some other behind-the-scenes stuff I'm going to kind of go through real fast. So here is, you have the animatronic Godzilla, which is kind of a 3/4 prop that was used for the extreme close-ups, like when Godzilla reacts to seeing Kiryu for the first time, his eyes kind of get big. That's what this particular prop is from on the far left. That's actually the animatronics behind the skin. We kind of talked about that particular suit. This is the making of shot, so you can kind of see the before, that was the head that was made, and the after where they have the teeth. There is a really cool shot. So there is on the left, that is the suit that was used at the end of the first film. And then the new suit that actually reconstructed features a scar. Godzilla X Mechagodzilla.
Thank you.
So Godzilla X Mechagodzilla, the suit created there is on the left, and that's how it looked at the end of the film. They actually made a new suit for this film, and they put the scar on the front to show that he had healed from his wounds. And then here's, of course, Kitagawa with the Godzilla suit. He was the suit actor for Godzilla in the movie. There's your Godzilla skeleton that was used in the flashback scene in Tokyo S.O.S. and appeared for the first time in Godzilla X Mechagodzilla. And then I have this guy taking a nap. I'm not sure really what he's doing, but the miniatures are really wonderful. That's a guy, and that is, I mean, you can see the scale of that. That is an amazing, impressive feat that they put together. And then this particular prop, I didn't even know this existed until I saw the book. This is a half-size Godzilla suit that appears a couple times. So it's been, and I have a picture later on. So here he is in the sub. So when Godzilla attacks the sub, that's the prop that they used. It wasn't actually a full suit. And then later on, we're gonna have Godzilla being webbed up right here. So you can see how small it is. It's about half size from the regular suit. So they actually made, and there's the Kamibus. I mean, you can see the detail and how small these things were and how they were shooting them and filming them, staging the pictures that they were trying to make. And then a couple additional pieces of trivia. So one of the Shobijin was actually, she had an appearance in Ultraman X, which was actually probably one of my most favorite Ultraman series. And she appears in episode 18. No, Ultraman X, yeah. It was actually done by Taguchi, who was here last year. Okay. So I bring that up because the episode features a farting space cat called Mu, which is exactly as it sounds and even better because the monster falls in love with Ultraman and then also forgets what love is, and it's just a blissfully stupid comedic thing. And also, it's my son's probably one of his favorite Ultraman episodes. He's 4 years old, so the fact that she has kind of an appearance as a Shobijin there, I didn't actually realize that she was the same lady in Ultraman X. And then another thing is the reason Akane, the main protagonist, the pilot for Kiryu in Godzilla X Mechagodzilla, only has a cameo appearance in this film is because at the same time this movie was being made, she was also filming Sky High. It was both a drama series and a live-action movie that they made later on. So that's why they introduced Akane, and then she's basically off to the U.S. to do the training. They had to write her out of the story, but they wanted to bring her back for that cameo appearance.
Right. I wanted to interject from a technical angle. If you don't know, I'm pretty sure that they have been doing the web effect of the Mothra silk, and also is it Kamiba, the giant spider that blows silk? Kumanga. That was achieved using styrofoam, which was new in the 50s, melted, I believe, with acetone or a solvent, and then heated and run through a blower, and then it would come out with just that right texture. In America, when they do like spider webs, like the set on the Addams Family or the Munsters, they use a blower and blow rubber cement. And if you've ever played with rubber cement, you know how you can make little threads. Well, they use rubber cement, but you can't do that on your monster suits because you'd never get it off. It would be gum, and everything would stick to it. This stuff they can actually clean off with a monster suit for another take. And I think that technology has stayed the same since 1961. What they used with the silk threads. Melted styrofoam and acetone, I'm pretty sure it is. Like there he is with the little blower. But I think that's so neat that they picked that up. Weird things that you notice when watching a movie. I was telling Matt this last night. I noticed, and I watched it again recently, you know when Chujo at the end is trapped inside Kiryu because the port got damaged and he went in? On screen, what you see is MPB, which would be, is it MPB? No, MB3, which would be Maintenance Bay 3. But what they say in the dub, and I wonder if this was a gag on the part of the dubbing group, they call it MP3. And that came out just at the time that MP3s were a hot new audio format that everybody was suddenly adapting. And because if you look at it, it definitely says MB3 painted on Curio, but in the dub they say MP3, and I've never figured that out. One other little detail that I wished I'd had time before we came here today, and I just got very rushed. I had a freeze frame of the overhead shot of the scene where the little nephew makes the Mothra symbol with the school desks, and I wanted to count it, and I didn't have time, but there must be at least 70 or 80 desks there, if not more. I would love to hear the mathematics involved and how long it would actually take a 9-year-old child to carry 80 desks out of a school and arrange them symmetrically in a pattern.
Apparently 5 minutes.
Because this is another case where we are definitely it's fantasy and we're expected to suspend disbelief. But the beauty of it is, you're sitting there going, hey, wait a minute, how could he get all that? And then the shadow flies over. And I burst into tears again because Mothra goes flying around it, and you're so wrapped up in seeing Mothra's big entrance that you forget about how idiotic that is and how totally unbelievable. He makes it work. This guy, I think he's a terrific director at selling that kind of stuff. It's like, don't think, just go on past it and ride with it. And he does that very, very well. What do you got, Ira?
Yeah. We got about 20 minutes left. If you want.
Right. You ready to open it up?
Yeah, we should probably.
Here's what we're going to do. This is where I go into my Phil Donahue stage. I love to do this with panels. And what we will do is we will ask y'all if you have any questions or comments, and you will get your say. Yes, sir, you were first. No? Okay, here you go.
I just wanted to pass along that the comment you made about the paintings at Toho Studios and them being big, for the folks that have been lucky enough to be there, when he says big, the Godzilla at the studio is at least 10 stories tall, so it's like maybe 100 feet tall.
Yeah, something like that.
But the painting of Mothra is the width of this wall and twice the height.
Wow. Yeah, that's the entire side of a sound
Yep,
studio.
it's the width of this wall, maybe even a little more, but twice the height. It's really big.
Wow, very cool. Next, yes, young man.
What do you think caused them to put cameos in Tokyo S.O.S? Because from what I remember, that was in Space Amoeba.
Oh, it was. It's
Yep.
totally non-canon in that sense. I know what you're saying, but there wasn't. He actually originally wanted a different monster, and Toho didn't want to show it dead. So because you never know what they might want to bring back, but they were pretty sure. If you have another comment, you're pretty sure they were never going to bring him back.
Oh.
You see what I mean? That was a monster who passed his sell-by date. So they could afford to kill him off, and not worry about it. Whereas they weren't going to, they might want to bring Baragon back someday. They did once, so, you didn't want to use a name monster for that. It was a minor one instead.
Yeah, I see where they're going. I said,
You see where they're going?
yeah.
Okay, great. Then.
Actually, I want to add something to that.
Yes, go ahead.
Maybe on Toho.
On mic.
Okay. So Toho Kingdom, they I think they made a book that shows.
That's better.
Okay. So on Toho Kingdom, I think in promotion for this film, they had a book that shows that the Kiryu saga, not only is it a direct sequel to the original Gojira,
Right.
but it also connects to some of the other kaiju films from Toho, like Rodan, Mothra, Frankenstein versus Aragon, and I think Space Amoeba was on that list too.
But in terms of, they may say that in a book, but in terms of the canon of the kaiju world that includes Godzilla, it's really in its own space. It doesn't really connect, I don't think.
In the previous Godzilla film, they actually mentioned Mothra and War of the Gargantuas.
That's true, which was a stretch. But let's face it, they're not consistent with this stuff. The canon is shaky, yeah.
See, I finally get this thing and I forgot what I wanted to ask.
What's happening?
Let's see,
We'll come back. You'll remember it. Give me a second. Who's next? Yes, Daniel.
Right near the end there, when you guys were talking about, the suspension of disbelief of how did the kid arrange all that desk and everything, but Tezuka does a really good job of selling the let it go because Mothra appears and it's a nice entrance, but there's also a suspension of disbelief vote. So he set up the desks, and then instantly Mothra's just there.
Mothra sees it somehow
Yeah,
through some. Well, Mothra has this satellite network.
that signal with teleportation.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Again, you just but Shujo, the old man, set that up earlier. He said, whenever this symbol appears, Mothra will come, and you just go along with the gag. Okay, you remember. You're on.
It wasn't so much a question as much as a comment on how much I love the animatronics in this movie. Especially how expressive Godzilla is. His eyes dilate and, whatever the reverse of that's supposed to be called. He snarls a lot. He looks around. He just is. This is the most expressive Godzilla outside of CGI that you can get.
It's a great face. They really do a lot of clever stuff with it. Thank you. Yes.
Is Mothra the only female kaiju?
That's a good question. Anybody have any opinions on that? Who?
Violante, Legion,
Violante. Violante is female, and Megaguirus too. That's true. There were a male and a female Rodan as well. So yes, the ladies have been represented. And a female Muto in Godzilla, so they keep doing it. Yes, sir.
I was just curious because I really love Kiryu's design. And I was wondering what you guys, the guys in the panel, maybe everyone else, I don't know, what your favorite Mechagodzilla design is. Because Kiryu's mine.
I agree. I agree. You
I
guys?
definitely show Mechagodzilla, but to add to Kiryu, Nishikawa is the one who, he didn't do all the artwork, but this is Nishikawa's stuff, and he basically is the one that they picked the final design for. But these are the other designs that they were kind of choosing from, but I'm definitely a Showa Mechagodzilla guy.
Well, the Showa Mechagodzilla, I will admit, made the coolest toy ever. If you've ever seen that fully animated radio-controlled 74,
Yep.
oh my, it's like
There's one
like
image
$900 when it came out. I could sit and watch that thing for hours. It looks better than it does in the movie. I mean, it's really gorgeous.
I'm kind of mixed because I like them both for somewhat radically different reasons. There's a kind of goofy charm that makes the old Showa era Mechagodzilla really.
Well, also his role is different. He's a villain in
He's
that.
a villain.
He's a good guy in the others. I like the 92 one version.
Yeah.
92, 93.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I like all the Mecha Gs. I
Yeah.
think they each have their strong points. Yes, Hamilton.
I think the reason Kiryu is my favorite Mechagodzilla is the scene at the end where he walks up to Mechagodzilla, his hand starts spinning, it turns into the drill, and he's just stabbing Godzilla.
Yeah,
and
that's
it
pretty
turns
cool.
on.
That's a cool
I
thing.
still remember that after I saw the movie, and I still love the movie for that reason alone.
Very cool. Thank you. Yes, sir.
I was wondering if you're going to actually mention the other level of symbolism going on in this
Go
movie.
for it.
Okay, well, the domestic audience in this movie might have noticed something, a little bit more than the Americans might have. But there is the whole idea of Mothra being a stand-in for the United States, and Kiryu being a representation of the Japanese military. And if you look from the beginning, Mothra's opinion in the beginning
that
of
is
Kiryu
really
saying,
interesting.
get rid of it, or else. And then what happens at the end? Mothra is able to reconcile with Kiryu and say, help me defeat Godzilla. So
That is
there's
very
a change
interesting.
of opinion, and it represents the change in opinion between the end of the war and in 2003.
I would be wary of reading more depth than is there into, especially the Millennium Godzilla films. I don't think there was that much thinking.
There's not, since
but
you
I
did.
think you could interpret it.
Watch the movie thinking about that.
I'll go back and give it another view and
You'll
see.
notice.
I have a hard time believing that there's really a deeper propaganda level in that.
I don't think it's propaganda.
Well, you know what I mean, political symbolism, if you will. But I'll give it a shot. Certainly they've done it before. Certainly Smog Monster in the original Godzilla, and Lord knows Shin Godzilla
Yes.
is loaded with political
Yeah.
symbolism. So, by the way, if you have not
It's so.
seen it, I would highly recommend getting a hold of the dub of Shin Godzilla. If you haven't seen it, it is so much easier to get through because you're not reading 4 lines of subtitles at the same time. The dub, I know we like to hear the Japanese, but the dub is very cleanly done, but it's just a lot easier to soak in
because there's so much information being thrown at you. It's almost comical. They're almost making a joke about how much subtitle there is. But if you take that one layer of the dialogue away and only have to read the subtitles of the locations, it's a lot easier to go with. Next. Yes, sir. Here, go ahead.
Most of your libraries today are carrying the Shin Godzilla, the dub version.
Okay, so you can get it at the library and check it out. Excellent, that's even better. Yes.
Okay, so at the end of Tokyo S.O.S, there's the little post-credit scene with the DNA of the various monsters, and there's also the artwork of like the various mecha kaiju. How far along do you think they went with planning for that?
There wasn't. There was no planning for that. That was just it was a concept, and it was kind of the way they wanted to end it. And basically, Toho was always planning for Final Wars to be the 50th anniversary film. There was unfortunately never a trilogy. There wasn't really plans for it. I wish they would have done that, but Toho wanted to move forward with a bigger kind of film and scope anyway. So.
Okay. Next. Yes. I'll come around.